What's going on, guys? And it's JFT back with Combat Sports Central, and we're back with another career retrospective. And this is the first episode of the Dana White Tuesday Night Contender Series inspired career retrospectives. And we're starting with a Hawaiian that trains out there with Max Holloway, Yancy Medeiros. It's Maki Coconut Bombs Pitolo. And we're going to start by looking at his amateur career from 2009 and 2010. So in 2009, he started his amateur career, winning 4 fights in 2 years for his amateur career to come to an end. He won all 4 fights and won one in every single round. The first round, the second round, the third round, and then a decision. So we technically would go with the 4th round on that way. Pitolo is an extremely fun fighter to watch. He's pleasant to the eye. He is an output striker with some power in his hands. His career didn't start like a UFC prospect, however. After his amateur career, in his first 3 fights, he actually lost twice, and this would be the first time he lost back-to-back fights in a while, as we are going to see. Fairly, his second ever pro fight was against a fighter with 20 pro fight experience. So from there, he'd go on to win a lot more than he would lose. In his next 13 fights, he'd win 11, and let's go through some of those now. The streak, again, didn't go without its ups and downs. He'd start the turnaround in 2014 at an age of 23 years old, which is pretty young in MMA. He'd win 1 in September and 2 in November, fighting 12 days apart in November. That's pretty ridiculous. In his 3 wins in 2014, he'd finish 2 of them, following that up with a strong 2-0 2015 campaign. A lot of footage is not out there of these fights, but Maki Pitolo improves his record, and he moves on to being signed by a UFC Fight Pass run fighting organization before he made it to the Contender Series. Pitolo makes use of similar style to Max Holloway, to be honest with you. It's a lot of forward pressure with high outputs of strikes. He never really takes steps backwards. Also, I didn't mention this in the first run that I did over Maki Pitolo, but I forgot to mention that he's actually a really good wrestler as well. He uses his forward pressure to get in on guys, get them up against the fence, and then he'll shoot a double leg or a single leg, and a lot of the time he'll find a way to get his opponent on the back. He does this in one of his title fights later on in this episode. You'll see me mention that he uses it as kind of a new skill that we haven't seen before, but when you go back and watch some of his fights outside of VFC, when I was doing this video, I noticed that I used VFC mainly as a source of understanding where Maki's come from and how he fights. But in his fights earlier, he does take a lot of guys down, and this shows clearly that he's got the skills, and that's how he kind of wins his title fight in the VFC, but we'll get to that later on in the retrospective. To start 2016, Pitolo would find Victory FC, as I mentioned, a promotion that was then aired on a growing but now massive UFC Fight Pass, and he would fight on Victory FC's 49th event. In his first fight, he took on Andrews Nakahara, and he walked forward relentlessly in the first round. After winning that first round, he'd come into the second round, putting Nakahara away with a straight right hand against the fence that would put him down, and then he would follow up with some ground and pound, quickly dispatching of Nakahara in his first fight for VFC. Then, on the historic 50th event for Victory FC, he'd take on a wrestler of 26 pro fights. We wouldn't see much of Pitolo in this fight. The much more fluid striker, Maki, would land an overhand right, ending the fight in just 48 seconds in the very first round. It may have been a quick night, but it solidified and set up Maki Pitolo's fight for the VFC 170-pound title. And for the title bout, Muay Thai kickboxer Cassius Kane would meet him for the 170-pound belt. Pitolo actually missed weight for this one. It was his first time missing weight. He missed weight by 2 pounds for the first time in his career. So in a 5-round fight with Pitolo showing more parts of his game, mixing in takedowns in this fight with some of his forward pressure, Maki would win the fight but not take the title, but would take an immediate rematch at VFC number 54. And this would be for the legit VFC 170-pound belt, as Pitolo would make weight. If the win with the weight advantage was a step back for Maki, the second fight with Kane would also slide him back on the UFC's radar. With the forward pressure, you always leave yourself open to eat big strikes from a counter striker. And with Cassius being a counter striking kickboxer, this was shown in the fight. After a counter right landed in the first round, it took only 5 seconds in the second round for him to suffer his most devastating knockout loss.
Can let Joe know what you think about his scorecard. Turn in your own scorecard round by round on Twitter. And this is done!
However, in a bounce-back fight on VFC 58, he would have to come back quick to try and avenge his most devastating TKO loss. Pitolo fought well against Dakota Cochran in the first round, and the same for the majority of the second. Cochran would push a takedown, and Maki would find the back. But with only 20 seconds left in the second round that Pitolo was winning, he gave up his neck trying to get up, and Cochran sunk in a deep guillotine. At that 22nd mark, Cochran would sort of solidify that guillotine, get it more under the neck, and he would get mount position, and with only 2 seconds left, force Pitolo to tap out. This was the first time Pitolo lost 2 in a row since his MMA debut in 2013. Pitolo referenced these ups and downs in his Dana White Contender Series post-fight interview. In MMA, you go through ups and downs. Probably the biggest down for Pitolo would just influence a massive bounce back. In his next fight, he didn't let it go past a minute in the first round. After the first round finish, he would actually get a call to compete on the Contender Series for the 13th episode in July of 2018. But in another road bump, he injured his shoulder and fell out. So instead of 2018, he would then go to Bellator, and in a fight that seemed it would make it to a decision, Pitolo sunk in an RNC at 240 in the final round, and this would lock him another spot on the Contender Series. However, this Contender Series matchup would not be to his advantage. With his fighting style, if Maki were to get a finish, this would all but guarantee him a shot in the UFC. However, he'd fight at 185 pounds, so up a 15-pound jump from his normal weight class for an opportunity, giving up 4.5 inches in height and a 4-inch reach. This for Maki was nothing to stop him. With this, Pitolo would not disappoint and win in 1 minute and 37 seconds, getting one of 5 contracts handed out on that night. This was one of Maki Pitolo's most impressive performances, and it would guarantee him a shot in the UFC. And that was his most recent fight, where we will see Maki Pitolo. Soon we'll get news of his next fight, and then soon we will get to see him inside the UFC octagon. This capped off a career of ups and downs with a UFC contract. So what's next for Maki Pitolo? I want you to let me know in the comments section below. If you learned anything in this video, make sure you leave a like. And if you want to know more about UFC prospects, you want to know MMA results in general, and you want hot takes, information, make sure you subscribe to Combat Sports Central. But that'll do it for me today. Thank you so much for watching, and peace out, guys.